This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Hey Google, turn my lights off. Carter, are we supposed to be learning anything this week?
Andy, do you have any more stupid questions for me?
Say something bad.
Poop.
So this week is a week dedicated to purely pediatrics, but it's a pretty simple week. So in all honesty, I'm gonna be using it to catch up on a ton of research and just like random projects I have going on. I spent this morning all at a coffee shop with a friend just to keep me accountable, because some of the stuff that I'm doing is just straight mindless low-key scut work. And like, if you're gonna do research in med school and undergrad, I'm gonna be completely real, that's a big part of it. And I'll kind of explain why I'm not the biggest fan of research in the world later in the video. Today is actually National Coffee Day, so drink up. Also, support my guys over at Win Coffee Supply. Link in the description. Help me pay for med school, please. And you get some awesome coffee. And support Vietnamese coffee farmers. Please do it. In med school, there's no shortage of research projects you can do, and like, usually when you think of research, you think of like being in the lab, micropipetting, or staring at slides all day long, but that's really not the case for a lot of research. And let me show you an example of one of mine that I'm doing. This project that I'm on is called NLP, Natural Language Processing. It's actually a multi-institutional project with MCG and actually Columbia Medical School. The purpose of it all is to train machine learning to recognize certain traits, aka EPAs. These are like assessments that the AAMC has deemed a applying resident should have. And so it's taking a bunch of preceptor evals. So when I go to rotations, my preceptors are gonna give me evaluations, and we're training a machine or an AI to basically pick out these 13 to 15 criteria so that, you know, when residency programs are looking through applications, they don't have to go through every single one individually. And so it's a really cool project, but it's kind of scout work, to be completely honest. And this is kind of a training module, so I can actually show you guys this. These are all real evals that came through our system. So just a quick example, EPA 1 is you can gather history and perform physical examination. So we would go through every single one of these sentences and kind of tag them as, okay, this sentence says he demonstrated proficiency in his ability to obtain a psychiatric history. That is a positive for EPA 1. So I would go down to EPA 1 and tag 1. So that tells the machine that that is a positive statement for that particular EPA. And then you repeat that according to whatever EPA it goes under, or if it falls under like truth telling or discernment, accountability, or medical knowledge. The problem with this, however, is you realize just how cruddy evals are, and not in the sense of like they're mean, but you realize just how useless they are in terms of like actual grading. Take this statement for example. It says blank name is a very compassionate and proficient student who did extremely well on his family medicine rotation, which sounds great, right? But technically, according to the EPAs and the AAMC, what they're looking for, I can't tag that as anything. So that's the problem with a lot of these evals, is they're just nice, you know? But just nice doesn't tell us anything, which is really, really scary knowing that I'm programming this. And a lot of the feedback that comes through is just nice feedback because that's what humans are kind of like trained to do. You don't want to be harsh on them. But the problem is just giving lukewarm feedback doesn't help anybody, including the student. So that's a great research project. I can literally run through 100, 150 of those eval statements just in my downtime. I have a laptop, I can take it anywhere. And that's a great example of doing research that isn't like your traditional research, which definitely fits for me because I've had a pretty rough experience in research and it's exposed some pretty rough truths about the industry. Okay. I have a CNRS patient visit today, so I gotta dress up a little bit. But since I'm talking about catching up on some of my research projects, I think it's a time to have an honest conversation about research in medical school, because if I'm being completely honest, it's not as pretty as the rest of the internet and the rest of, I guess, med school influencer culture makes it out to be. If you're applying to medical school or thinking about it, research is definitely on your mind, and it definitely doesn't leave when you get here. Now that most medical schools are moving to a pass-fail preclinical curriculum, as well as step 1 being now pass-fail, extracurriculars are the biggest topic people talk about to stand out when applying to residency. And when you talk about extracurriculars in medical school, you can't escape talking about research. As much as I talked about having some research projects going on that I'm working on, if I'm being completely honest, I don't enjoy research, and that is mainly due to how it's set up. And let me explain. I remember in our first week of medical school, one of our faculty members came up talking about just the foreseeable future and how we will eventually have to apply for residency, and he warned us to not treat it like a game. But research is so contradictory to that statement. There was definitely a couple months where I thought my calling was 100% orthopedic surgery. And for anybody familiar with the process of applying to orthopedic surgery, research is a big, big factor. And I was sitting on a panel of program directors, kind of trying to get an idea of how they grade or rank applicants. And one of the things was they have a score for number of publications, and then not just that, but a sub-score for authorship, and then a sub-score for the impact index of the journal it was published in. And to me, it was just like, it was such a apparent numbers game, and it didn't really sit right with me, especially with some of my past experiences in research. Now, I've had both versions of the extreme. I've had some very, very good experiences in research where I was in a lab with a mentor that was extremely helpful, and I credit to a lot of growth in both my problem-solving skills, my scientific just thought process skills, as well as my growth as a person and medical professional. But then on the other end, I've had some pretty borderline abusive relationships where I've went into a lab, I worked a ton on a huge review paper, and when it was submitted, I got bumped from 3rd author to 8th author, and then when looking at the paper, the 5 people in front of me were just friends of the lab. And I was working on this paper with a couple older medical students at the time, and they were like, yo, what's up with Andy? Like, he did so much for this paper. I ended up doing all 185 citations on a huge neurology review paper, and they basically got blackmailed. And the PI was like, hey, you guys want to go into neurosurgery, I gave you this project so that you could get into a residency program you wanted. If you don't like what I'm doing, I can take your name off the paper too. And both of them were first co-author. So that's just a big example of just the office politics that is involved in research. So even though I did have a lot of research, both coming into medical school as well as like within my first couple months of medical school, I was always scarred and hesitant to join projects because of just the pull of office politics within them. And it's a very much like I just want to make myself look good kind of thing. And especially with the huge emphasis on just publications in the residency application process, people just want to put out scut work, and then the PIs know about it, or principal investigators. They know that you're a medical student, and then so they basically just use you as free labor, and it sucks away time that you could be studying, you could be doing other things to build yourself up, and then it puts you in such a awful position where you're powerless, and that's just not good for any medical student, both like mentally and just professionally. And this is not a dig at any of the PhDs or research projects that are going on that are super impactful. There are plenty of students in my class that are incredibly passionate about their projects, and they have really, really good future implications. And I understand the importance of academic literature. That's how we get the things that we learn in medical school. That's how we get the new treatments. That's how we know what to do in those niche situations. But if I'm being completely honest, in medical school, 98% of the papers being pushed out is just because I want my name on something. Not because you're passionate about it, but because you need it to play this game of applying to residency. And that just has bothered me for the longest time. And the worst thing about it is it bothers the residency programs and the faculty too. I had multiple conversations with people who review applicants, and they're like, yeah, we completely acknowledge that research just doesn't have the same impact as it did back in the day for medical students, because they know that they're just doing it to put their name on something, not because they're passionate about it. And which makes it harder for the people that have research that they are passionate about to really show that off. And even worse, down the line, there's implications of, say, orthopedic surgery again. Yeah, they come in with a ton of research, but how many of those residents are actually going to continue research after they match? Most of them don't. They just come in, they train as an orthopedic surgeon, and they do what they came to do and nothing else. So people are basically using research as just a weed out tool. That's all it is. And because of that, you're losing the purpose of what academic literature and what academic research is supposed to be, which is being on the front lines of innovation.
I don't think we need to do a...
Pediatric anesthesiologists, and we would like to welcome you to our podcast series, The Alpha Women of Anesthesiology. The question we want to answer is, why are there so few women at the top of our specialty?
Two. Okay, get in focus, Rishay. Get in focus. Get in.
Tell me to focus.
Yep.
Okay, Dad.
So, hanging out with Rishay again. If you guys remember him, he is the audio engineer mastermind behind our hit single, Stay Inside. Incredible video that took a lot of work. If you guys haven't seen it, please go see it. But he's also a third year, so you're coming off your internal med rotation, right?
Just got off of family med, just starting internal med, so.
Yikes.
But also you're thinking of applying to a more competitive specialty than I am. So like, I know we've had this conversation about research, and actually why I came over was to work on a research project that we're working on together with. But like, what's your take on how like us as med students have to handle research?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty nuanced thing. You know, a lot of us come into med school really passionate about things, and sometimes that can get easily lost. And I think we're warned about it left and right on many fronts. And I think that same worry about losing that sense of empathy for your patients, that can be lost for other passions as well. And I think one of them is also research related. And so, you know, I think people start to fall into this cycle of trying to get out pubs and do work for work's sake so that you can fill out your application and look more competitive. You know, it's kind of a toxic game to play sometimes, but there's no other route to go for a lot of people. So I think it can be pretty difficult to try to balance that out, but the best thing you can do is to try to stick with things you're passionate about. And I think a lot of people will tell you, a lot of your mentors will tell you that focus on things you're happy to do research on. Don't just do it for that spot on your ERAS application. Actually genuinely wants to find results for this because you believe that you're making a difference, and you'll probably get way more out of it and be able to present it in a much clearer format as well. So, and work with a good team. You know, do projects with your friends, with your colleagues, people you've worked with in PBL maybe even, if you click really well. So yeah, I
mean that's a really good point. Like, I had the poor experiences I had in research actually taught me a lot, because it taught me what I didn't like to do in research. Like, you know, I didn't like staring at spreadsheets all day long. And then also, you know, if you have a specific skill set, like audio engineering and producing, like I do a lot of video work and like photo media editing, like there's always a way to bring that skill set into your research. You know, people always think about it as micropipetting all day long, and that's not true.
Yeah, I mean that might be where you started in undergrad or maybe even in high school, but certainly not the end all be all of research. There's so many creative ways that you can take a question you have and turn it into something grander, and you know, really turn it into investigative work that you think is fulfilling to you. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think this is a perfect example. You know, I'm helping run some audio engineering on some podcasts, and Andy's working the media side of things as well on that. And I mean, it's a really good way to fuel both our passions, but also further progress in research and in literature.
Yeah, and I mean, this podcast series that we are currently working on editing right now it's an interview series with notable women leadership in the field of anesthesia, talking about the importance of mentorship and their journey into a leadership position, as well as some of the gender disparities in kind of the field, and I think the overarching industry of medicine as a whole. So like, and these are not insignificant people either. They're former program directors, former deans of medical colleges, current and former presidents of the American Society of Anesthesiologists. So they have a ton of incredible information. I do have to wait for the manuscript to be actually published to release these podcasts, but they will be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever else there is out there. So keep on the watch for that announcement. But I think it's a good way of showing, like, research doesn't have to suck. But I think it's trying to get back to the core of what research was originally supposed to be. And that's, I think, the difficult part for a lot of medical students.
Yeah, I think you'll find that it won't feel like work if you truly feel like you are serving a purpose in your research. And the best way to do that is to find something you're passionate about fixing.
Yeah, well said. All right, well, I think I'm going to end it here. It's been a pretty long week, and I have a lot of stuff to catch up on. So see you guys in the next one. This entire week, I've had a little bit of free time, and with that comes trying to catch up on some of the extra learning I've been trying to do that med school does not really teach you. That is where the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare, comes into play. If you guys haven't heard of Skillshare, Skillshare is an online learning community filled with thousands and thousands of unique curated courses ranging from topics like personal finance, personal productivity, all the way to taking care of plants, which, you know, for the aspiring plant dad is great. But anything you ever wanted to learn, it's there, and it is made just for you. That means there are no ads, and you can stay focused on learning a new skill and growing yourself and your skill set. Crazy enough, since I never really had the money growing up, I never really got into stocks, but after picking up books like this, I actually started trying to look into it. So I've actually been looking at a course of stock market fundamentals from Zach Hatley that I've really been enjoying, and they make it super easy to learn. I know a lot of you guys watching are brilliant students, future physicians, or future healthcare professionals, or you're just brilliant in general. I believe in you. You are definitely the type of person that would love Skillshare, and if you've wanted to learn a skill you haven't before in your life, or now you have the time to pick up that skill you've always wanted to, Skillshare is the perfect way to do it. So for you, using the link in the description, you can get 1 month free, and we work with Skillshare so that the first 1,000 people to click that link will get that deal. Click it. Go check out Skillshare. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video and helping me to learn something I never thought I'd learn about. So, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.